study. I've got a book here on the uniforms of the Napoleonic Wars from the early revolutionary battles to 1814, so before Waterloo. There's a nice dust cover. And some sticky has been left on the binding, which I'll probably clean off later. There you can see we'll have some color plates. So this is published by Blandford and devised and illustrated by Jack Cassin Scott. Military research by John Fabb. Text by Philip J. Haythornthwaite. London, 1973. There's a historical introduction, the French Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars, 1792 to 1814. The Italian campaigns, (1796 to 98). The expedition to Egypt in 1798. The Marengo campaign. The failures of 1799 paved the way for Bonaparte's coup d'etat of 9th November, when he established a governmental system controlled by 3 consuls, with himself as virtual dictator as the first consul. Now this sounds familiar on so many accounts, and marks his ascension from general towards emperor. In March 1802, the Treaty of Amiens between Britain and France brought temporary peace to Europe, and on 2nd August Bonaparte was proclaimed first consul for life. This was a milestone in his life. In 6 years he had risen from an unknown artillery officer to the dictator of one of the most powerful states in Europe, gaining a formidable reputation as a brilliant and, compared to the rigid tactical theories of the late 18th century, unorthodox commander. Peace was short-lived. In May 1803, Britain imposed a naval blockade on the continent, and Napoleon began preparations for the invasion of England. In August 1805, Napoleon took the initiative, marching eastward from Boulogne. An Austrian army advanced towards him, but unaware of the French position. By a masterly outflanking movement, Napoleon maneuvered his army behind that of the Austrian general Mack, who, after a futile attempt to break the encirclement, was forced to surrender at Ulm on 17th October. What followed were several victories for Napoleon: Austerlitz, the defeat of Prussia, and then his unfortunate engagement in the long Peninsular War in Spain, 1807 to 1809. 1809 to 1812, up to Napoleon's invasion of Russia, and again the campaigns of 1813. And the Allied invasion of France. Here we have the different parts of a chasseur's uniform. We have the pelisse, scarlet cloth with black fur trim, orange lace and braiding for the rank and file, mixed green and gold lace and braiding for the non-commissioned officers. Officers had gold lace and a white fur trim. We'll look at some of the color plates. This introduction talks about the tremendous amount of detail that went into the military insignia and different pieces of accoutrement that each member of the Grande Armée would have had, as well as all of the Allied forces. Cuirassiers would have had armor, different weapons. Here we have long sword, a musket or a rifle. Here's a pistol. Different types of swords, of French swords. They're cavalry swords and sabers. Bayonets. Saddles, each with a certain type of decoration and insignia telling about the unit, about its history, about the commander and its country. Here we have two French hussars from the 4th Hussars, 1796 and 1790. Not much has changed in their uniform. Their riding boots have spurs and gold trim with tassel. They still have the fur trim here, and the braiding, and the different kinds of feathers. There are the Russian Chevalier Guard officers with a very large hat and plume. Almost a medieval style doublet there with large, tall riding boots and long cavalry sword. These are the Swiss light cavalry with their green uniforms and tall hats, and the trailing part of the hat, although this might be his hair, this is part of the hat. It's unclear if that's hat or hair. I would assume that's hat because he does not look like he has a queue, does it? I do like the mustache. And here we have the Polish artillery with red trim on the boots, long sabers, high collars, and very high red plumes. Red lined to look like a lining coming out and braid here. nicely decorated saber, and the big white fluffy plumes, and kudos for another nice moustache there. Here you can see these coattails again to show the inner lining, the red and white of Saxony. These are British soldiers. This is the King's German Legion, so this would have been under George III of Saxon origin. Saxon, Hanover, and I think Gotha. So these are the uniforms that would become the standard British: red on the surcoat and white trousers. And you can still see these decoration on the New South Wales Guard uniforms in Australia. This particular hussar, no, it's an infantry private, has blue cuffs with white trim in the buttonholes and gold buttons, white fur, and the George Rex, or Georgius Rex, King George, and his pack, his water, gunpowder, everything that he needs there, with his musket and his firing pin carried across his shoulders. So very, very well turned out with his spats and shiny black shoes. This one is the hussar officer with a fur on his head, probably bear. Very tall, red and white feather, and beautiful gold and red braid. Lots of braiding, gold down the side. Here we have France, French hussars, very decorative with the black sable fur trim on the surcoat, and the pillies, you can say pillies there, the imperial eagle, and you can see the leather straps because they're mounted so that will hang down over the side of the horse. These are the French marshals. So the foot marshal with his sash, very gold sash, very fancy gold brocade, and fur-trimmed hat with the cockade there, as well there with his boots. So his stockings with beautiful embroidery, with a fleur-de-lis and buckled shoes, and when he's mounted he will have his boots, his riding boots. And with the great coat, he's in full dress, and again with another golden sash and a very long gold saber scabbard. And this one is 1805 Machin Bessières with lots of gold, and here's the green. The green of the Swiss Volunteers again, with a very big feather plume in the hat, and some more French cuirassiers. These are mounted troops, or lancers, and they have the very shiny plate armor around the torso, and very fancy helmets, metal helmets, with feathers or horsehair, long, coming down over the top and the back. Very thick gloves with large cuffs. And these are the hussars from Baden in Germany, with their green and red, long sabers and white tassel. And another German regiment, the Nassau Jägers, the pursuit riders, in their dark green and black fur saddle blanket. Huge, huge fur and feather trim on their helmets. This is the 33rd Regiment of Infantry of France, 1807 dress with very high red plumes and white uniforms with golden stripes and blue accents, cuffs and lapels, gold buttons up the side of the spats as well. The Dutch or Holland private, it's an army infantry, and here we have an officer of the second line, and he also has his insignia there around his neck and the cuffs on his boots. Mamluk troop, so a colonial French troop from 1806, with his very, very colorful sash, sky or French navy blue with gold trim, beautiful big saddle blanket, lovely Appaloosa horse with decorated tack, very shiny done-up hooves, and you can see the shoes on them. His shoes are very shiny, large red pantaloons, and he wears his saber curved towards the front. Here we have a Spanish dragoon, Villaviciosa. I don't know if that means what I think it means, Viciosa, Villaviciosa, but this is a trooper from 1806. Beautiful, very yellow saddle blanket and green lapels and cuffs. Lovely gold-trimmed hat with a red satin ribbon. Here we have the Saxon Guard Grenadiers. They're very long, high spats. And the 17th Regiment of French Dragoons. This would have been a mounted regiment as well. Swedish Royal Lifeguards. Not lifeguards, but Royal Life Guard. And here we have more gold in the sash and the blue of Sweden. Very high officer's hat. And the Danish King's Rifle Corps in their green, with a green cockade on their hats and a rifle. Another Swedish Grenadier Corps with their huge fluffy hat. Italy Guard of Honor, again with very decorated helmets, high feathers. More Italian Guard of Honor, officer in full dress, mounted here with his helmet, and a trooper in stable dress, it's for the stables, and in undress capecoat. And these are the officers dressed for being mounted. Spanish guerrilla fighters. You can see what they've put over their shoes. And very colorful, these two. The hat. Now here's a beautiful one. The French chasseur à cheval of the guard. So, the mounted cavalry with his bayonet there, musket and saber. Very beautiful with the imperial eagle. And the surcoat or pelisse with the fur trim, red gold braid, and green with gold braid with red cuffs, and lining for the hat with fur, probably black bear or sable, and red and green feathers. Another pursuit Jäger squadron, the Guard of Württemberg, another German troop. Very nice saddle blanket, and there's what has become a symbol of the German police on his plate armor there. And Prussia, the Second Life Hussars, in their black uniforms with grey and white fur trim and skull and crossbones. Very formidable regiment, the Prussians. The Portugal Caçadores, the browncoats. More Prussian general staff. Austria-Hungary Grenadiers. Saxe-Coburg Saarfeld Infantry. And the Russian Jaeger Regiment. Very dark green, very warmly dressed as well. France Portuguese Legion. Again, a very dark brown to rusty red colour to go with the Portuguese uniform. French Geographical Engineer. Now there's a very large hat belonging to the Bavarian Pressing Regiment, a grenadier, and of the Leib Regiment, and this one is the sharpshooter of the Pressing Regiment. Very long-barreled muskets and rifles. Other Prussian here, the Guard Jäger Battalion. Jäger and the officer on the right. More white-clad Austrians with their huge helmets. And a British troop, the mounted general officer and officer here with his big sash and wigs. Here he's got the sideburns of the later style, fashion, and the very dark grey spat there. His high hat with the tassels fore and aft. The Brunswick Corps, so these would be from the Dutch kingdom, and the high feathered wide hats of the French chasseurs à cheval of the line. I must apologize for all the ambient noise while Mr. Dog continuously searches for a comfortable spot, and his claws make scraping noises on the floor a little bit. There's the Westphalia Garde du Corps, so bodyguard. Westphalia being a kingdom in Germany. Very impressive armor there. Swiss Legion, St. Galois privateers. Bavaria and Saxony, these are surgeons, a Bavarian surgeon and a Saxon surgeon. That's just the fashion I have in my mind when I think Saxony, historically anyway. And here we have the French engineers of the Imperial Guard with their shiny helmets. Infantry of the Vistula Legion. Vistula, river as well. Very smart looking. And another German troop, the Hesse Darmstadt Chevaulegers, so light cavalry. Light cavalry usually rides. They are almost like mounted infantry. They aren't heavily armed, but they do fight on horseback. Unlike the light horse, here we have the 2nd Chevaulegers Lanciers of the Imperial Guard, the Imperial Guard Lancers of France. And here, these are British Greek troops, the 2nd Greek Light Infantry, wearing their traditional Greek hat, jacket with cuffs and stockings there, shoes. Saxon Jaeger Corps and Light Infantry of 1813 and 1810. And let's go straight to this one with his very showy hot pink trousers. This is the French or Polish 1st Chevaulegers Lanciers of the Imperial Guard. So Napoleon in Poland. The square top of the helmet there, the Polish flag on the lance. There we have a Spanish colors on the top of the lance. These are the 7th Regiment Lancers of La Mancha of Spain. A beautiful saddle blanket there, and the horse as well. And he's wearing a sort of a surcoat, I think it is, without fur. Instead of fur, we have these large fabric shoulders, reminiscent of 15th and 16th century, almost like a Don Quixote. And here we have the French Valaisan Battalion, red and white. Neuchâtel Battalion, France. The horses pulling the gun. The French, the 30th Chasseurs à Cheval, again green and gold. And Poland again, General Officers Parade Dress, 1796, and they still have the hot pink on the uniform, in the stripe and in the sash. Saxony Chevaulegers Light Cavalry from 1812. Britain 10th Royal Hussar, 1812. The French Corsican Regiment, very practical. And the French Lithuanian Tatars, very smartly mounted with his lance. French Grenadiers of the Imperial Guard with the moustache, very fancy hat with braid and feathers, cockade, and the braid for the sword as well. Duchy of Warsaw, the Krakus, Polish officers, 1812. This will be during the Russian campaign of Napoleon. The French Isenbourg Regiment, Carabiniers, and an officer with his green and gold, and the Imperial Eagle, Kleefberg Infantry. That's his top of the hat with probably bare white brocade and musketeer. And they have the Prussian eagle. The grenadier does. They also look very smartly dressed. 42nd Royal Highland Regiment, an officer and a private with a kilt, what looks very like perhaps black watch, which is often used, I think, all the braid as well. It's very different. Aide de camp, French, very well dressed. Russian cuirassier. So here we have the Tsarina's regiment and a mounted Pskov regiment. An officer with his cuirassier's torso, armor, and then we have a trooper of the Pskov regiment and the Russland regiment from 1812, the Kleine Russland. It's possibly East Prussian. Here we have a Russian musketeer infantry and grenadier with a surcoat, and the Württemberg artillery, an officer and a private in the center, and here's another officer's. This is the French and Swiss infantry, you can tell because they've got the N for Napoleon. Saxon bodyguard. Hanover Feldjägerkorps. Kielmansegger, so 1814, sharpshooter and rifleman from Saxony. And the Prussian Landwehr infantry from 1814. Some of them would be standing armies, some of them would not. Here's the Russian light infantry. They're green with red trim. And here we have paragraphs telling about each regiment and its history throughout the Napoleonic War. Well, the uniforms throughout the Napoleonic Wars. The interesting history of what the uniforms mean. For example, I will read you about the French Mamluk trooper. On 13th of October 1801, Bonaparte organized a troop of Mamluk, the warlike tribesmen he had fought in the Egyptian campaign, for French service. The nucleus of the troop was a band of about 40 Mamluks he had brought from Egypt, the remainder being drawn from French cavalry regiments. The corps of Mamluks was attached to the chasseurs à cheval of the Imperial Guard, forming part of Napoleon's bodyguard. The Oriental uniforms were basically alike in style, but as each man was allowed to wear whatever color he chose, the appearance of the corps was quite startling. The headdress was a red tarbouche, worn with a white turban and, until about 1806, a brass plate in the front. Let's have a look again at the Mamluk. Very colorful, with his Appaloosa horse, and whatever color he wished. class of the uniform, as well as regimental terms. A guillette, a loop of cord or lace attached to an epaulette. And if you don't know what an epaulette is, we can look that up. Cloth or lace shoulder decoration with hanging fringe. We also have Hessian boots, hussar, light cavalry, term originally Hungarian. A few interesting things here. Caçadores, Portuguese light infantry. Bicorn cocked hat with 2 corners instead of 3. Schirm, it's a cloth cap worn by the Prussian Landwehr. It's too bad we don't have a picture of the Prussian Guard. They're very, very famous and tall. The Prussians. The Prussian Imperial Guard required, and does to this day, a man to be 2 meters tall or 7 feet tall, and they wear very tall hats of black bear fur, making them look very imposing, but also very impressive. Here we have the Grande Armée of 1812 Order of Battle, where the headquarters were. The Imperial Guard, 1st, 2nd, 3rd Division, and Cavalry of the Guard. Napoleon, Grande Armée, which invaded Russia in 1812, contained more foreign than French regiments. It was the only occasion when so many European nations marched under a unified command. The large number of European states over which Napoleon had domination does much to explain the development and interchange of styles of military fashion during this period, the majority being clothed in uniforms of French design or inspiration. There's a list of all of the battalion, 1st Army Corps, 2nd Army Corps, 3rd and 4th, all the way to the 11th Army Corps. Then we have the cavalry, 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th, and then the Austrian Auxiliary Corps. Even those regiments officially French often contained foreigners, and some were wholly foreign. For example, the 11th Infantry, the Piemontese, which would have been part of Austro-Hungary later, and then even later Italy. The 113th Infantry, the Tuscans. 123rd to 126th Infantry was Dutch. 11th Light Infantry Swiss and Piedmontese. 33rd Light Infantry Dutch. 14th Cuirassiers and 11th Hussars Dutch. 8th Chevaulegers Lanciers Polish. 9th Chevaulegers Lanciers German. And 19th Chasseurs à Cheval Swiss. And the 28th Chasseurs à Cheval were Tuscan. And here we have a list of uniforms by nationality and the coordinating plate number or corresponding plate number. So we have Austria, Baden, Bavaria, Brunswick, Claveberg, Denmark, France, Great Britain, Hanover, Hesse, Darmstadt, Holland, Italy, Nassau, Portugal, Prussia, Russia, Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, Saxony, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Warsaw, Westphalia and Württemberg, the whole of Europe taken up in these Napoleonic Wars. And here we have a list of uniforms by arm of service. Artillery, cuirassiers, dragoons, engineers, general staff, grenadiers, guard regiments, hussars, infantry, Jäger, light cavalry, light infantry, and medical staff. There we have the book about the uniforms of the Napoleonic Wars with color plates. And I hope that you've been able to enjoy this despite all the helicopters flying around outside. I tried to chase them away. But at least we've had some relaxing time looking at pictures, turning the pages of the book, and some claw sounds from Mr. Dog. So just a little relaxing time out. Remember to be good to yourself, stay safe, and be extra